Out here coming with you with another book review, and it's going to be posted like the regular book review Wednesday, but I'm just reviewing it now as I'm making this video. It's the same day as uh, last Friday, so technically I'm making two videos the same day, but I wanted to do it because I just have this book fresh in my mind and I don't want to make the video when some of it starts to leave my brain. So without further ado, let us dive into Dracula in Love, which I just got done reading with today. And basically this book follows the Bram Stoker novel, but a lot of the events, although they may be similar, they're told in sort of a different way and through a different perspective. And this perspective is through one of the main characters, her name being Mina. If you've read the regular Bram Stoker novel, this will probably be a lot easier to grasp because a lot of it that it goes in within this novel is also in cohesion with what happens in the Bram Stoker novel, because it's pertaining to the particular events of the Bram Stoker novel, but told through a completely different perspective. So if you read the Bram Stoker novel, you may have a more clear understanding, and I did read the Bram Stoker novel, so this kind of helped. But it does not mean that you cannot read this without reading the Bram Stoker novel. You can understand this, I think, fine without it. But I think it does help in establishing what this book is trying to establish and what the Bram Stoker novel tried to establish. And the author has like little notes explaining sort of what she was trying to get across and what Bram Stoker's novel was trying to get across. So for the most part, I can say that this book was, I think, really well done. I think it was a better vampire book than a lot of other vampire books that have been done lately. I thought this one was really in depth with particularly the main character, Mina, because it's told through her voice, and I think that her character was particularly interesting in how she was a very rational person, but still had this really deeply emotional side, and how that emotional side played with a lot of the dream sequences that she has throughout the novel, as well as her relationships with the particular men in the novel, as well as the other women in the novel. But basically the plot in a nutshell is it just follows her voice through sort of the Bram Stoker setting. But she tells it in a different way than Bram Stoker does. Instead, she expresses sort of the torment that her friend Lucy was going through. And Lucy happens to be a character who really likes one of the men that's actually in the Bram Stoker novel as well. But she becomes slowly insane when she realizes she has to marry off somebody else, while at the same time feeling like that her actual lover abandoned her. And even though he really technically didn't, which again the novel tries to explain as it goes through. And basically what happens is that she is labeled as insane, and they do all of these tests on her in a particular hospital, and that's where Von Helsing comes in. And where Dracula ends up coming in is through Mina, because he and Mina have this sort of connection, and this connection can be explained through the dream sequences she has, and through a lot of hints that the novel gives you. In particular, like there's one part where she there's a picture of her, and then there's like Dracula floating in the background. But Dracula doesn't really technically show up until towards the end of the novel, but you do get a sense of what kind of Mina's struggling with, and how that has to do with a lot of the sensuality of vampirism and things like that. For what this book was, I think it was a good read as far as trying to encapsulate a lot of the mixed emotions that the human mind can have. And I think that's what makes a lot of vampire novels kind of interesting and appealing to maybe a lot of people, because they do explore that. And I think this book did a good job because it had good characters and it had a good story overall to carry it through. And I think that overall, if you want to find a good vampire book, this is definitely something worth checking out, because it does explore the vampirism, and it tries to explore Dracula and his character a bit. Although the ending I thought was a little rather strange, just where it leaves off, I'm not sure if it didn't seem like how it ended. It didn't feel, I guess, how do I put this? It didn't feel like the connection that she and Dracula had was as powerful as it maybe originally was. And at times I think it's she didn't really emphasize they do try to build up this whole emphasis of how they're connected and things like that, but then at the end it kind of leaves you with this kind of hollow feeling, like she's not really connected to him, I guess, anymore in a way. But I think that's sort of the point. However, at the same time, I think it would have been nice to have them leave off sort of with them, because, I mean, that was really kind of the whole point of what the novel was trying to drive at. But it doesn't really leave the reader off that way. At least it didn't for me. But for what it's worth, it was a worthwhile read. It was interesting. It got me into thinking about things of how our mind works, and how sometimes people try to suppress us just because we may think of things or certain things. In particular, how we think it's out of the greater good for the person, but in the end we're really destroying that person. And I think a lot of that has to do with particularly with the female characters, because again, the asylum that Lucy sent to and that eventually Mina ends up at, that is run by Dr. Van Helsing, and his name's Helsinger in this novel instead of Helsing, is instead kind of an insane place, because they just do such insane stuff to their patients, and then these women are kind of like troubled because they're kind of suppressed by society, and a lot of the stuff that we would consider maybe normal now wasn't really considered normal back then, and then they would treat people badly just because they had certain tendencies. So for the most part, it was a nice vampire read. I think it's a good vampire book. I think it's definitely way more worth value than something like Twilight or a lot of vampire teenage shows. I think this is more diving into something in depth, and really is trying to get you invested in a lot of what's going on. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just the ending kind of leaves you with a little bit of a, you could have added something in there, you just could have put a little thing in there to emphasize your point, but it just kind of goes, yeah, that's the end, and but for the most part, I did find this novel enjoyable. There were male characters that were interesting as well, like Dracula was pretty interesting, even to an extent Mina's selected husband or fiance. Jonathan was, in particular, I think, trying to do the right thing. Because you kind of see him and Mina sort of struggling with the same thing. And how they deal with that in different ways. So for the most part, it's a good fantasy vampire-esque stuff. If you like vampire stuff, this will be really your thing. I don't really particularly read vampire books so much. I find that they get too central for me at times, and I just go, okay, all right, I get the point. Yeah, okay, right. But with this one, it was good for what it was. It did try to establish what it wanted to do, and yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking out. So if you haven't, by all means, I found it at my local library, but I'm sure you could find it. And it's by Karen Essek, and apparently she wrote another national bestseller called Leonardo Swan, which I guess has to do with Leonardo da Vinci and one of his muses. Apparently. But overall, I did find this interesting, and I think worth looking into. It kind of establishes a lot of the changing in society, because in the time period, it's sort of like women are getting more rights, women are becoming a little bit more independent. So we see how these things sort of alter our ways of looking at nature. In particular, Darwinism. It talks a little bit about Darwin in here and how his evolution theory is connecting us with animals, and how we experience animal tendencies. So I think what this book was trying to do is really hammer kind of that stuff down. So for what it is, it's a really good sort of, I guess, philosophical and thematic take on the Dracula book. And I particularly like this one better than the Bram Stoker, just because I think Bram Stoker just kind of was making a horror story for the time, and I think for this one, as a horror story, it's a little bit more psychotic, a little bit more interesting, because it's told through a character's perspective rather than as like an outsider. So yeah, I think this is a decent vampire book, and if you like vampire books, definitely worth looking into if you like vampire stuff. And yeah, I thought it was really good. So having that being said, I think that's really all I can say. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. And until next time, bye. Oh, and before I say bye-bye again, I will be starting on this book, and I started a little bit on it, and it's called A Rose for the Crown, and this is talking a little bit about before Henry VIII came to power, I believe. And it's going to be a biggie, and I'll try to get it done within maybe possibly 2 weeks if I can. And next week I'm going to review one of the books that I've already read, which I do have a clear understanding of what it's about. Again, in particular, I didn't want to give so much away with this one, because again, it's just sort of one of those novels you just have to read in order to kind of grasp everything that I'm saying. But if the thematic messages sound interesting, and the whole type of vampirism of what you already know about vampires and the sensuality appeals to you, this will definitely be worth your time to read, because it's that kind of a book. And I think it's written really well as far as writing goes. I think that the author does a good job of writing it. And as far as this one goes, this is just more of a historical perspective, and I believe that it will be very interesting. So that will be that. And yeah, until next time, hope everyone has a wonderful day, month, year, week, and I will see you all tomorrow. But you'll be watching this video next week, even though I'm filming it right now, which is Friday. So yes, so it's a video from the past. But anyways, I think that's really all I can say about this particular book. Any questions, comments, concerns are welcome. If you have any particular questions about what kind of vampire lore it is, or what kind of, if you needed more clarification on certain things, just let me know and be more than happy to answer, and hopefully it can be something up your alley. But I think that's all I can say, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!